Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining in the world. Very excited to be connected. Very excited to have special guest, Donnie Kazakis. We're here to talk about how to win at corporate events, why that title is so important, and why this is a topic we even want to share about. In a post-COVID world, companies, brands, organizations are all rushing and trying to flee back to say, how do we recover this in-person, this engaging vehicle for lead generation, creating more of a social vehicle? I think we've all been to an event where we understand what it's like. When you walk in the door, it's perfectly planned. The seating chart's amazing. The AV is crisp. The acoustics are on point. The presenters are locked in. They're comfortable. Everything just feels like it's a flowing, perfect machine. On the other side of that, the flip side, we've all been in events as well where things are not so good. Speakers are on stage. Maybe they're a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe the sound is not resonant. Slides and videos aren't timed in. You notice that. And as a brand team, that could be catastrophic to your brand because the moment someone moves to social media and says, hey, I just left this major conference, this was abysmal, that could be a very, very big problem. And so today, what we wanted to do is combine two forces, one on the agency side, myself, the other on the service side of audio visual production with Don. We'll introduce his background in a bit, but when you combine these two forces, you understand what is the partnership landscape and how do you really take all the right steps to build amazing events, because our landscape is shifting. People are digital, people are remote. It's hard to get people in person. It's hard to get people to invest. And so what we also wanted to do is give people some tips and tricks to make sure you're set up for future success. So on this day, Thursday, December 12th, we really appreciate you, Don, for being here. The goal of this for all the audience members that have decided to join, maybe you're in event planning, maybe you're in corporate communications, maybe you're just interested in this as an attendee. Whatever that is, you will have the ability by the end of this webinar to do three main things. We try to make these webinars very practical and pragmatic. Goal is not to really sell you anything. The goal is not for you to walk away and feel brainwashed in any way. It's to walk away with an open mind and the practicality to apply some of this stuff. The first is we want you to be able to validate and challenge your event ideas and strategies. As I mentioned, you might be doing this already. We all can use a little fresh perspective. So in this stage, two of the categories we'll talk about is how do you give yourself the ability to challenge and really push the limits of saying, is what I'm doing great? Can I amplify? What are the right questions to ask? The second is how to be a collaborative, trusted partner, not only for your events, but also to think about collaboration in any partnerships that you might take on, any projects you take on, especially if you're on the marketing or lead generation side. Typically, there's a lot of agencies that have a seat at the table. Being a trusted partner is the number one way to continue to drive sustained growth. And the last is maximizing content capture and post-event promotion. We want to make sure that when you're investing money, you also understand how to capture the right content so it becomes a timeless asset over time. And Don, on this, anything here practically that you really want to touch on before we jump into it?
Yeah, absolutely. We recognize that a lot of people that are on this webinar right now, watching this webinar, are professionals with lots of experience. I get together with my peers a few times a year and listen to what they're doing in event production, and it either reinforces that I'm doing things well, I'm doing things right, I'm doing things that are modern, or it gives me new ideas and challenges the fact that, hey, maybe I need to do things a little bit differently. And that's what we're here for today. Some people are going to go, yeah, I already do that. Well, that's awesome. That means that you're a great event planner. And some people are like, oh, I never thought of that. So we want to give you that opportunity to think about what's possible. And then on collaboration, it goes both ways. We're going to look to our clients, the people that are watching right now, to put trust in us. We're going to put trust in them, and there has to be that two-way dialogue. And then on the content, we are going to spend some time talking about this. It's important to have a strategy and think about all the ways to use the content from your event.
We love it. All right, so sit tight, get comfortable, nurse that tea, nurse that coffee, whatever you're doing. We're about to go on a little wild ride here. So the next 35 minutes, the agenda is going to break down. Number one, understanding your needs. Planning is so important. I can tell you in my personal life, I'm a very poor planner, and therefore my social calendar suffers. But when it comes to work, really, really understanding needs, understanding the brief, locking in the first initial steps, locking in budget, all these things are so important. We'll give you some tips and tricks at how all those things assemble to be really on point when it comes to your corporate events. Number two, defining the art of what's possible. The name of the agency, as ever wonder, the reason why we have that name is because we want to stay in the art of what's possible. Wonder to us is about curiosity and creativity. Where those things intertwine, if you're constantly in a state of wonder and you're leading with wonder, not judgment, good things are going to happen. I oftentimes tell people there's a reason why we have 2 ears and one mouth. Listen more than you talk. Ask the questions, listen for the feedback. You will run with that. You'll be able to develop a great partnership just by practicing the art of listening and what's possible. Next is being a great partner. We've mentioned this a few times. I think the number one aspect that we're going to touch on is trust. The number two aspect is risk tolerance and risk understanding. Both those things, when combined, you can really create a lasting impression, both for your audience, of course, and then for the client that's paying for a service. And the last bit here, number four, is maximizing content capture. What we mean by this is with the proliferation of AI and the ease of creating content in the future, AI still needs a lot of work and still needs a lot of help. But in addition to that, use AI to clip up a lot of this content. The important thing is capturing it and also being aware that you have the ability to capture content and use it as promotional materials. Last bit here, we'll talk into questions and answers. We want your hard-hitting questions. Put us on the hot seat. Make us feel uncomfortable. We'll be happy to answer them.
All right, let's have some fun.
Yes. So without further ado, Don Kazakis, we're going to get in a little bit to your expertise and experience because I've had the luxury, the pleasure, the beautiful times of working with you as a client. So we on the marketing side have been able to partner with HB Live to really think about how they reshape lead generation and how they continue to build the unstoppable force that they are in the state of Connecticut, in the state of New York and Massachusetts. Hugely, hugely regional partner. I've seen events that they've done. I consistently get amazing feedback. But Don's experience, he's been with them. He's an OG. He's been with them for 3+ decades. I don't think there's anything that he hasn't seen at this point, but he's staying curious to that. So Don, maybe give us a quick beat on your past, present, future.
Yeah. I don't know how to top that introduction. So thank you. I'm humbled. What I just want to stress on is that I've been at this for 30 years, but my journey has been an evolution. I'm a constant learner. I mentioned before I meet with my peers regularly, so I know what is current. I want to learn. I want to know more. I want to see all these cool things, and then take that and apply it to corporate and university event production in all manners. So don't just think, hey, this is an old guy that old G is old guard, but this is an old guy that is stuck in the past. Myself and the team at HB Live, we are definitely not stuck in the past. We can bring new ideas and help you execute at a high level. And I do want to reiterate and say, Brian, you and your team have been an amazing agency partner for us and helped us get from being stuck post-COVID into some brand new content and leading the way with our brand online.
Happy to do it. And also you exercise curiosity. That's why you're here. So on my side, when I say founder principal of an agency, really I'm part of a broader collective. Our team is incredibly connected. I think the background that I will give, just to give you guys a small note on who I am, I'm very left brain, right brain. I want to connect logic as well as creativity in anything that I'm doing. My goal now is to design demand at a very, very high level for organizations. If we can help you unlock growth, if we can help you look at things from a different perspective, I don't think anybody knows their brand better than the people who are working in it every single day. Our goal, again, is to help you play in that art of what's possible, which will feed into what we're talking about in section 2. And I think the last bit here is storytelling. There is an unbelievable higher percentage of your ability to allow information to stick when you're telling it in the form of a story. Even going back to first principles and saying something like, once upon a time, there was this example. That will take people into this play. The reason why Disney just continues to grow and dominate the world from a place of possibility and creative is because they tell really, really good stories and they loop in current pop culture. And those stories really tap into a part of your brain, which the right event and the right preparation for an event does exactly that. It tells a story with the equipment you use, the ideas you have, the creativity you pull in. And ultimately that starts with an architect like Don and his team up front. So without further ado, let's leap into a quick quote here by Gloria Steinem. Without leaps of imagination, we lose the excitement of possibilities. Dreaming, after all, is a form of planning. Planning tends to be one of those things where when we get into it, it feels arduous. It could be a bit clunky. People think that they want to skip through the step. When they see that line item in a budget for planning, they go, do I really have to pay for that? And I am here to firmly say, yes, it's arguably the most important thing. It will allow you to not pay for additional needs on the budget on the back half. So Don, one of the most important things you've told me since day one when we did our stakeholder interviews It's about planning, planning, planning. So maybe if you could just frame understanding your needs as it relates to events, be a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. The first question that we ask our new clients or a new event is to what I say literally is describe in your own words what you're trying to accomplish. What's the setting that you're trying to set for both your presenters and for your audience, whether they're in seats or they're remote. And hearing that plain language about how they're trying to accomplish their job gives us ideas on how we can move forward and apply technology. We don't want to get into a conversation about, hey, I need a screen, I need a microphone, I need this, I need, right? Technology will flow into the setting of your event. And there's a lot of things on this slide that are core to the needs of your event. And I just want to dive into two specifically. Don't ignore the others, and we will touch on those. So we do want to define your objectives. We do want to know about your brand, about your CEO or your keynote speaker, why they are there, why they are on stage. We want to know about your audience. Are they staff? Are they clients? Are they VIPs? What is it that you're trying to do with these people? And then we then overlay that with all of the logistics necessary to get the job done. We're going to dig into the floor plan. We're going to dig into where's the best place for screens? What's the right type of screen? What's all the technology that we need to drive this out? And then map out that run of show so that we hit your event on time. Everybody knows where they are. Everybody knows their cues. And this is true for really any type of event. We're going to talk about some event types in a moment. The things we're just going to touch on for a moment is about the metrics. How will you define success at the end of this event, right? Is it about the attendance? Is it your staff that's attending? Can you test them on the content? If it's a ticketed event, obviously it's going to be revenue and butts and seats and people online. Um, and then when you get into what resources you need to accomplish the job, how much of that can you do internally versus who do you need to have externally? Going back to sort of the top of the slide, when we have a client that is doing a repeat event, maybe they do an annual all hands meeting or they do an annual customer conference. That's where we want to get into the art of what's possible. We're going to touch on that in a moment, but don't be afraid to say what if or what's possible. And I know, Brian, there's a couple of things on here that are important from the agency side when we start talking about the content.
Yeah, so I'll touch on target audience and stakeholders. Before I do that, Don, I just had one question. Let's say you're in a new role, you know you have to do an event. You've been asked by your executive team that you have to put on an event to, I don't know, inspire possibilities or engage all of your customer suppliers as an example. And maybe you don't necessarily know the right questions to ask or maybe to evaluate the right partner. How do you in your seat, because I know you're having these conversations all the time, how do you help people kind of pull out some of those questions if maybe they don't necessarily know what to ask when it comes
Yeah,
to
that is a great question. Well, if you think about how I frame the question at the beginning is just describe your event, right? And everybody, all of the meeting and event planners and all of the executives, they can describe the kind of setting that they want to have for their event. And by expressing that, we can make them comfortable with the discussion around how do we then apply technology to this. I got to tell you, I've had clients that come to me and they start describing their event, and it's a very functional, direct message event. And they had started out asking for, oh, we need fancy lighting, or we need, a huge LED wall, or we need, and oh, we want all these great funky things. I'm like, hang on a second, time out. This is a business conversation that you're having with your staff. What you really need to do is make sure that the message is clear and they're not wowed by some distraction, wondering why we're doing all this funky stuff, and talk them down from a high level production. On the other side, we've had clients talk about, hey, we want to make sure that we recognize people who have been with our company for 30 years. They've made a big investment in the organization, in their careers here. How do we recognize them? And we come up with an idea to add a little bit of wow factor and give them their moment in the sun. So these are the things that we need to talk about candidly on the front end in plain language about like what are those objectives for the event.
Yeah, it's so helpful because you might not know the questions you need to ask, and the right partner comes to the table and kind of inspires that thought. You're almost fishing, right? Pull it out. And on the other side of it, the way we connect back to target audience, I think, is arguably one of the most important things, whether it's we're talking about marketing objectives, sales, or we're talking about how you have the right audience or the right event planned. Reason being is because, I'll have clients come to me and say, we need to be on TikTok. Everyone's on TikTok. We need to be on TikTok. And the reality is that TikTok has developed a certain audience, a certain approach. And yes, the age range is starting to widen. The algorithm is starting to rapidly change as time goes on. And people are often using TikTok or ChatGPT as a search engine now. So they're augmenting what's happening in Google. But why target audience matters is because there is a reality of where your users are. And I think part of the reason why there's all this drama around the Jaguar rebrand is because there's a whole set of individuals that spend a lot of money on maintenance, on cars, on heritage, that now have just been completely alienated with no warning. And I think that's one of those things where you have to say to yourself, okay, did we just cut out 94% of our target and alienate those individuals? And did we intend to do that? Because if we're targeting this small faction of individuals, how do they consume content? What is the message they want to hear? Because I would argue if they're going over a younger audience, that audience is much more on experience based. That audience is much more on pop-up locations and bespoke experience, not seeing things on a classic launch video on classic social media channels. Reason why I bring that up is because target audiences are about preferences, pain points, and interests. Once you can understand where the pain is that you're relieving, that's how you know to go after. So as Don mentioned, why this matters agency to event, the event you're doing, how you pick your venue, the equipment you use, how much brand image you're infusing into that, who you have as guest speakers, all of those investments that you make are directly connected to your target audience. If you're talking to an audience that's 50 to 75 years old, it's going to be a very different interest set, a very different knowledge set than very young 20 to 35. That's just clear. So when you identify these things early on, it also allows you as an agency or service-based business to have very bold retorts back to a client. Hey, said client, you're talking to a manufacturing audience who are engineers by trade. We're coming at them with a very mixed message. We do not believe that's a good idea for these reasons. And that will feed into risk tolerance as well. So target audience is big. Also, it really matters from a target audience perspective who your end user is as a client. Because if you're talking to a junior corporate communications planner or event planner, you really want to make sure you're arming them with the experience to help them take everything you're referring to back up the ladder to the decision makers. So target audience is not just external, it's also internal. And then stakeholders, this is one that I think is a very powerful one because I've had projects get 3-4 months. And when I say months, I'm being genuinely serious on a website design or delivery, where maybe a stakeholder that's deeply influential to the decisions being made do not get looped in for 3 to 4 months. And that individual says, how did we get here? This is awful. We need to go back to square one. Whether you like it or not, whether it's your fault or not, yes, that's a catastrophic outcome, but it reflects on you as the service provider. And understanding and considering your stakeholders early on. If you're not aligned with leadership, getting things in writing, shaking the right hands, really reiterating what we're agreeing upon, this could be bad because you don't want to get a month into a brand initiative where you're rebranding a company and they say, I don't like the color green. Well, it's like, well, number one, we should have known that. But number two, one person's subjective preference shouldn't dictate what goes out to the audience because your target audience might resonate and who you compete with. So I think understanding your needs is key. And these are the conversations that are really uncomfortable. I often joke around about, dating and romantic relationships are the one thing where you don't manage expectations up front. You're out to dinner. If somebody asks you on day one if you want kids, that person's immediately dubbed as crazy. And I think it's funny to me because the uncomfortable questions up front are the ones that can dictate the most success in the future.
Yeah,
So
I want to jump in on stakeholders because I have a great story that I use, and I've used it often. So we met with an aerospace manufacturing company, and they have in the factory, I don't know, there's like 2,000 people running different shifts, and they would host a once or twice a year all hands event. So we got to the pre-con with the event planner, and the CMO was running late. So we started the conversation. I said, "Hey, just explain in your own words about like, this event. We've been doing this for a while, but I just want to make sure that we're on the right track. And she said, hey, look, it's an all hands meeting. They're going to talk to the hourly people. They're going to get a free donut and a cup of coffee. They're going to tell them what's going on with the company, and everybody gets to leave a few minutes early, right? It's really not a big deal. So, well, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask your CMO for the same question. And he came in the room, and I asked him that question. He said, "This is a once a year opportunity for the CEO to have an intimate conversation with the employees and lay out the strategy for the entire year to them in a comfortable and candid way." Two totally different answers. And ultimately, the deliverable was very, very similar, but we made sure that that message resonated down the line to everybody from the first row of those hourly employees in the venue all the way to the last row.
It's amazing how different it could be. Hopefully, the glazed donuts made it to the finals because a donut is the connection. Hopefully, that was
I think they served a buffet breakfast.
and then getting into defining the art of what's possible. So, what we just presented on this slide prior, these are six of the key things that we think rise to the top. So, cream always rises to the top. Here, defining the art of what's possible as this goes in, Don, when you talk about event types through technology, give me a sense about the right important questions to ask that will feed into what we just talked about.
Okay, so when we talk about the event types, there's all different flavors, right? So an inspirational event might be an awards program, an annual kickoff. Educational events specific to training. Informational might be that annual town hall or a shareholders meeting, right? Every one of those has a possible different setting. So the questions that the production company is going to ask is around that setting. And then when the event planners are working with that event production company, don't be afraid to say, what if? What if we had a panel discussion? What if we wanted to change the seating? What if we, fill in the blank, whatever it is, and then just contemplate, right? What is possible with these events? Um, and technology plays a key role in that, and you can't focus on that. It's about the message and the content and making everybody comfortable and confident in that room, whether they're the presenter or the audience member. So what questions that an event planner should be asking is, really tell me what my options are. What is possible in this event? What if I wanted to change something? And along that lines to get creative in the discussion.
When it comes to tech, I find this very important because there are things that I don't even know exist. Like I went to an event, this was probably 2 months ago, and they had this incredible kind of projection mapping wall. And then I went down a bit further to another booth, and they had this some of what I would see as the most beautiful screens I've ever seen, and it immersed you in the entire booth. Now I know the cost profile raises up low to high, et cetera. From a tech perspective, how are you driving that conversation? Because you're learning every day. HB Live is continuing to innovate. How are you feeding that information back to a client? Like when does that come up in the whole process of discussion?
Yeah, it's really important to convey what we're thinking with imagery, right? So I coined a phrase a few years ago, you can't see what I'm thinking. You can't see what I'm imagining. So, those drawings, those plans, those renders, these are all things that need to be shared. And we are going to talk about brand in a couple of moments, but understanding the colors that are represented, are there shapes represented in the brand that we can incorporate into the set, and then making sure that the technology is set up at the level of the what you're trying to accomplish with the event. And I keep on reiterating this. There's certain levels of events that need very high technology. You really need that punch. You really need that wow. And there's plenty of events that you just need good, solid, reliable, boring AV. And there's a whole spectrum in between.
And by boring, you mean the best of machines you don't even know are working because There's
Yep.
nothing that's standing out because it's so important. I can't tell you the amount of times I've seen slides or videos not timed to the speaker, and it just throws the whole speaker off. I mean, imagine having that dropped in your lap in the middle of a crowd. You feel the heat from the lights, you're sweating, you're already in an uncomfortable spot. Having the content drop perfectly, that's not boring.
Yeah, well,
Okay,
but let's talk about, the
sure.
speakers for a moment. And I know we're moving along. I'm trying to keep an eye on time here. So let's just talk about the event speakers because a lot of people have that CEO, or they want to bring in their executive team, or they want to have a keynote, or they want to have customer testimonials on stage. You want to consider who they are and are they comfortable, or what will make them comfortable on stage. And Brian, you and I were talking about this, with other events where it could, as part of the conversation with the client in describing their event, I want to know about who are the people that are going to be speaking, and are they comfortable on stage, and how do they interact with the audience. If you've got a CEO that roams the stage, you want to give them a Madonna mic and no lectern. They don't need that. They don't need that home base. If you've got somebody that is really nervous on stage, whoever it is, give them that standing point, give them that lectern. You need to talk to them about, what do they need for a rehearsal? Do they need to see their slides? Do they need a teleprompter? Do they need speaker notes? How do they do? Are they off the cuff or not? And then pay attention to those people and make sure that they've got the technology that they need to be comfortable. Adjust the lights a little bit. Make sure that they get a good chance at a rehearsal. So really think about those event speakers. Who are you going to put on stage, and are they the best person to deliver that message? And then, yeah, right. And then, just last on technology is you apply the technology to the message and to the setting. So I could talk about this all day, and I'm going to stop for a moment because I know we need to move on to the next slide.
And maybe before the speaker goes on stage, a small guided meditation, right? Depends. It depends. So being a great partner, this is something I'm very passionate about because both Don and I run businesses where we are a service-based business. We lead with service. If you've ever gone to a restaurant, you've had a really bad service experience, or you've ever gone to any retail outlet, customer service is so important because it quite literally can give you the worst taste in your mouth, but also a very bad brand experience. And being a great partner, there are some core tenets that you can do. And it's not all personality contingent. And what I mean by that is I want to make sure we set the stage that if you are an introvert, or if you are quiet, or you're a bit more passive, that doesn't mean that you can't excel to be a phenomenal partner. Service doesn't have to be in your face, overly jovial, etc. We're not talking about personality traits. What we're talking about are four key things that you can do to really think about. And if you set this checklist and say, okay, to become a trusted, reliable partner, making sure that number one, honoring commitments. If you form an agreement, whether with a handshake, verbally, written, email, whatever that is, hey, I'm going to send you those assets by 4 o'clock today. Something as simple as that goes a long way, right? And if you're not going to be able to honor that, manage expectations. I've been running into this internally with my team where I'm not honoring my agreements internally. And that's equally as important as an external agreement that you find, because what happens is people start to lose faith in you. People start to not take you at your word. And that's where trust really starts to fray. And then, so as you think about that, agreements and commitments are key, but then all the way through protection of your brand. So Don, just give us a beat on kind of how you think about these, and then I'll come in and give my sense from an agency perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So, partnership is two ways, right? So it's not just the event production company um, meeting these to be trusted. It's also the client side and the planner side of this. So yeah, commitments to time and budget and scope are absolutely critical. We want to know from clients upfront, what is the budget? What are you trying to accomplish? And from the trust perspective, we want them to know that when they share that budget number with us, we are going to give them everything possible that we can squeeze into that number, right? Um, we have a process that we follow. It's the discovery call, it's the site visit, it's the design, it's the approvals, it's the content review, rehearsal, right? So we want our clients to respect that we have a process that leads us to a successful event, but also recognize that that planner, that corporation, that conference has a process as well, which might be how do they how do they develop their content? How do they identify their speakers? How does this all progress? And we need to make sure that we mesh those, which gets into that timeline, right? If you're not developing your run of show until 30 days before your conference, okay, tell us that so that 60 days out, we're not harassing you for it. And then our job is to tell people what the risks of a decision or not making a decision are. And that could be as simple as, an outdoor event not having a set of emergency lights for, after dark. How does everybody exit the place safely, right? Other things that impact the budget that we want to make sure that we stress could cause a risk. Hey, we want to bring our CEO in live on Zoom into this conference on his cell phone from an airplane hangar in the Maldives, right? Okay, probably a bad idea. But expressing what those risks are for, getting that person through online, you can still choose to do it. Just know what those risks are. So we're really good at identifying those up front. And we also want to hear from clients, what went bad on your events in the past? How do we mitigate that in the future, whether it's through staff or technology, to make sure that that never happens again? And then, I know we're going to talk a little bit about brand, but we keep on asking, tell us what you're trying to accomplish. Tell us who you are. We want to understand you. If your event production partner is not asking those questions and trying to learn more about your organization, they're not going to reflect your brand accurately. But the agencies, that's really where you jump into it more.
And from an agency perspective, what I try to communicate is if you have one bad or negative brand experience, it takes 13 to 15 positive brand experiences for people to, number one, get over the bad that happened or to start to build trust back. So think about that. You make one major mistake, 13 to 15 good deeds to right the wrong of the bad deed. Just avoid it. And so when Don asks or talks about risks, there's also another side of rewards. Is there a reward to call on that CEO from the Maldives with maybe a poor internet connection? Or does it make sense for that individual to record a message and then project that at the event? All that's up for discussion, right? But protection of your brand, the way I think about all these 4 bits, it's the conversation and dialogue when you walk out of the room, right? Let's say you're an agency and you present, or you're the event production company and you have ideas. When you walk out of the room and that brand team comes back together and they review what you just talked about, what are they saying behind closed doors? The better you can make sure that you understand and you really push and strive to have that uncomfortable conversation to see the unseen, that's where we have to be, because a lot of people don't like conflict. We're not really taught at a young age how to handle conflict in a healthy way. But which conflict would you rather have? Discussing budget and being really refined on process early on, or showing up to the day of the event and actually having something collapse? Right? Which conflict do you want? And I think that comes down to risk and reward. But I try to put myself in the shoes of, if I were to walk out of the room, what are these folks saying about me? Because that's the real unadulterated truth that's happening. And you want to address those points head on. Can't be bashful to do that. And so being a trusted partner, once you have this trust that's built, everything's kumbaya, we have the budgets locked in, we're ready to put on a stellar event. You get to the day of the event, cameras are running, people are watching, the production crew capturing sound, audio, etc. You have all this really rich treasure trove of content. Then what? Don, tell us what you believe is the best way to maximize some of that, because capture promotion, you're doing it every single day.
Yeah, so it does start before the event with a discussion about your content and your content strategy. So we'll start with from the slide deck or the presentations, any video roles you're going to have. Maybe there's a reel that you want to use to promote that ticketed event or your customer conference. So all of those pieces of content are developed in advance leading up to the event. When you are on site and you got those cameras on site and you're rolling that record, it's a travesty if you don't use that video for something. But you need to have a plan. In some cases, that it's educational content and you're just going to replay it elsewhere. And you don't really give it a lot of thought. Um, so ways that you can use that content. One, video highlight. You're going to create a reel and you're going to play it out as a teaser for, in case you missed it, here you go. You can go to the replay. You can use that content for a year going on. Brian's going to talk about that in a minute. The session content itself, whether it's educational or informational, can be chaptered and stored and played out in a variety of ways. And I think we got some detailed slides
Yes, yes, yes.
here, right? Okay, so video highlight reel, right? So you capture it all, you get some B-roll, you get those audience interactions. And then you can do some amazing things with that. You can create some inspirational videos. You can give it to your HR team who can, turn some of those clips into some cool videos for your staff. You can, feature guests that were there or people that were in their seats. And then when you get into the session content, what we tell people is chapter this out and play it out according to whatever your exact needs are. If this was a ticketed event, that you had an in-room audience paying one fee, you had an online audience paying another fee, you don't want to give this content away at the end. If your goal for the event is to drive people to the seats or drive people to an online viewing experience, don't give the content away after the event. But if you need to make this available to all of the attendees, whether they're your employees, your customers, or the general public, make it easy to do so. Have that video edited, chopped up into segments, and then you can deliver that for the next, year until you get to the next conference.
And then going into some of that video capture, I want to point out and underscore one thing. If you're investing six figures and beyonds on an event, and you have content and you have amazing professional photographers and videographers there that are capturing the event anyway, if you don't choose to allocate a budget to use that in the future, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And the best way I can relate this to is if you're telling a great story, okay, and you tell that story once, and then you tell that story again, and you feel bored with that story because you've now told the story twice, you don't want to repeat it anymore. That doesn't mean that anyone else beyond those two people have heard the story. So think about it in the context of your mind. When you're creating content as well, you might feel like maybe you've beat this message too much, but there's a whole audience that hasn't seen this message. So if you have an event, it's a once of your annual event, you're going to do it next year as well. This is a really good opportunity to create things like social snippets and hype videos to promote the next year's event. It also gives a really good flavor of a recap. Connor on our team and I just were in Dublin, Ireland. We went to an event at a distillery. They were launching a brand, brand, wonderful people. Okay. They decided to launch an event because they were launching a brand into the Irish market. They invited all their suppliers, customers, partners, and friends to this event. Incredible that they heard that live. They felt the energy in the room. But what they also did is they had videographers corral all the areas of the speakers. They had individuals capturing B-roll. And within a few days after the event, boom, that's online. So now they've just opened this up from a Dublin, Ireland audience to an all United Kingdom, Ireland audience and a global audience. And we're seeing likes from all over the world. In addition to that, the following week, more content went live, pointed back to the website, pointed back to the brand. So now this event, yes, was a one-time fee, but there was so much effort put into it, so much high pressure. But now you see the social snippets rolling out. So they did it in an expert way. And I think we were watching it. And while I'm listening to the speaker, I kept thinking to myself as a marketer, like, I need to take and bottle up what this person's saying. The world needs to see this. And so it's so important. And I know it's another line item on the investment. And sometimes it might feel like you've gone over budget. But in my opinion, it's so much better to spend the money on things like that than to have your agency come to the table to create all new custom content because you're going to pay twice as much for that. So going a little bit further on this in terms of event hashtags, creating threads for posts, social is a really good environment when the content actually has meaning and connection. You'll notice as a brand team, if you're posting just generic content, typically it doesn't get nearly as much engagement as when you post things of your internal behind the scenes, your team, recognizing employee spotlights, moments in time where people can look at and go, HB Live, love those guys. Likely not going to get as much engagement, or likely will get a lot more engagement than if an ebook is dropped and maybe that ebook isn't referenced or important to you at that point. And so the did you miss this stuff? It's perfect. And now we have, tools. We use HubSpot. We're a HubSpot Platinum partner, and HubSpot has a feature called Content Remix. Content Remix is amazing because it layers in AI to allow you to drop content in, and then boom, it shifts it and creates a podcast. It creates a long form blog post. It creates paid search ads. They might need a little intervention. So whether it's you or your agency partner, but that's a way to really take and maximize content. The last bit is email campaigns. I cannot tell you the amount of emails I get on a daily basis from one, business development reps trying to sell me technology, and two, unnecessary, spammy, loud, pointless emails. So if we have a chance to create great email campaigns that tie to an event, that are repurposing content of it in case you missed it, or hey, we'd like to loop you into our story, these are email campaigns that I would thrive on seeing. I'll give you a very real example. One of our clients went to the largest learning conference in Europe. We did the booth, we did the hype video, we did all the work that led up to it. Didn't even cross my mind to send an email out. Their executive VP of sales came back and said, Brian, why are we not emailing our clients and let them know the success that we had at the event with this great hype video? And I said, oh my God, that's brilliant. And so we created a small, simple email campaign, launched the hype video, and you would not believe the amount of individuals that came back and said, one, didn't know you were there. Two, look at the booth. When can we talk? So this became a very, very great lead generation vehicle. And so I think it's an opportunity to engage with all the folks who couldn't make it, but also there's a certain effect, a network effect. When you see people doing big things, it changes the credibility, right? Like when you see a company gets their Series A round of funding and you see a press release, it immediately changes the perspective of that company. You'll say to a friend, oh, they're doing really well because you saw one brand impression. So I think it's a good opportunity to take that content and run with it.
And
But
I want to throw one more thing
of
on
course,
an internal email campaign, because we've seen some corporations do this where they've hosted their quarterly town hall, and there were three or four like very, very key takeaways that they want to reiterate for the next 3 months until the next town hall. And they would take a highlight, they would take that clip, and they would send it out to their team as a once a week or every other week highlight from the town hall, reiterating that point, and to drive that employee engagement, to drive the message that here's the goal that we've set out, don't forget about it, and then build a little bit of hype around it too. So don't discount using email for an internal campaign with some of this content as well.
so good, so true. We're at time, by the way. You must have a showrunner, Don, because we're directing. Must have did this the right way. To the audience, I will say this: as we wrap this up, we're going to question and answers. There's a feature in Zoom where you can go ahead and pop in questions. Again, put us on the hot seat. Ask us anything. The hard ones, we like the challenging ones. We will take this recording. We'll put together, and in case you missed it, we will wrap this up. So you'll get the slides. You'll get some of those practical points. And we as a collective company, we practice what we preach. So we do create content. We will put this out to the wild as a social snippet. If this was valuable for anybody that you want to pass it along. But Q&A, we'll give people about 30 seconds to ask any questions. Otherwise, we will. Okay, Don, first question in. You're going to be on the hot seat.
All right, hit me.
What are the biggest mistakes companies can make with speakers? And I'm guessing they're referring to actual speakers, human speakers delivering information.
Yeah, absolutely. So, from the standpoint of I'll take this in two sections. So on an internal corporate event where you have your internal team that are speaking, it's not rehearsing, right? It's making sure that those people understand how are you going to hand off from the CEO to the CIO to the CFO in that event. If you're going to have a panel discussion, how are you going to hand off between those things? And then listen with a critical ear. How do they talk? Do they need speech coaching? Do they need like just something that's going to make them feel a little bit more comfortable? And then, as I mentioned before, some of the technology, if you've got that CEO that can't stay on script, give him a script, put him on a teleprompter. From the standpoint of a more public or broader event or a conference where you're bringing in some sort of a keynote address, check them out. Don't just watch the video that they give you that promotes them as a speaker. Talk to people that have used them. Go to the references. Go to people that you know and trust and see if they know anything about this potential speaker. Talk to your production partner. Have you heard them talk before? I was telling Brian earlier that we were hosting. I'm part of a international organization of AV production companies, and a few years ago we had a conference. We brought in a keynote speaker. Seemed like a really great guy, really great idea, and it was we had a coffee break in the middle of his talk, and midway we realized he was horrible, and we fired him. And
On the
like
spot.
literally on the spot, we fired him on the spot, and then we took back that last 45 minutes, and we did some really great roundtable discussions. So definitely check out your speakers and be sure that they represent everything that you want them to be.
And Don, one quick bit on the panel, because I actually go to a lot of events with panels that I'm pretty disappointed with. Is there anything you guys do in the production side where, for real, where you maybe have a no-fly zone in terms of rules of engagement? Do you ever go over things with the moderator? Do you kind of guide that, or do you leave that more to chance? Are you
Oh
ever
no,
involved?
we try not to leave anything to chance. So at most of our events, we will provide a producer or director who will have a conversation with the moderator and talk about the flow of that particular panel. It becomes obvious right up front. Are Is this group experienced in having a panel discussion, yes or no? And provide some coaching along with that. The people that have it, we don't have to do anything. We just make them feel comfortable. And the people that it's obvious could use a little bit of coaching, we'll give them some advice and some best tips. But once they take stage, it's really hard for us to interact from there.
Gotcha. And so I don't see any more online questions and answers, but okay, two just came in. I take
All
it
right.
back. Next question. How do you handle the coordination of virtual or hybrid events? If any, what are the challenges with those formats?
Wow. Okay. Um, I am not qualified to talk about all virtual events. I'll just stop right there. That's there's a lot of companies that specialize in that. From the hybrid event perspective, we do that every single day. And just like the top of the conversation about tell me about your event, we want to know about so now we have to instead of having two key stakeholders, which is the presenter and the audience, we have to talk about the in-room presenter, the online presenter, the in-room audience, and the online audience, and what is the experience that each of them have to have. If you're talking about a corporate quarterly town hall, it's pretty straightforward, right? As soon as you get into a customer conference or a large conference of any kind, or especially a ticketed conference, the in-room audience and the online audience expects a different experience. You can't just use a Zoom webinar to deliver to that online audience when the in-room audience is having, a lot of glitz and glam and, different lighting scenes, and they're going to a coffee break or a networking break or to breakout rooms. That online audience needs something else as well. And you need to think about that, having some additional content, maybe a color commentary desk. There's lots of ideas for doing that. And then just to really put a fine point on it, the technology is absolutely critical. Internet, internet, internet. Have good quality internet, make sure it's tested, have a backup, have a plan. Internet, not just in the room that you're hosting the event, but for everybody that's going to be joining as a presenter online. You got to focus on that. And then obviously the visual and the video content. And there's plenty more ideas around that. So by all means, drop me a message. I'll give you some of our other pointers.
Love that. And Don, you also mentioned earlier today about the router that can handle multiple different connections. This is something that you just learned about. I had no concept of this. So when you talk about the importance of internet, technology is getting to the point where you can port in fiber optic internet, right? What did you mention as the
So what I was mentioning before was more along the lines from the technical production standpoint, which was the ability to send all of our audio and video signals over a specific fiber optic cable in the room. But when you do get to internet in, say, a convention center, right? A lot of the convention centers own hotels. They are charging tens or hundreds of $1,000s for access to the internet. A lot of the AV production partners can bring in an external cellular-based internet system, not just for guest Wi-Fi, but for production Wi-Fi or for production network at a fraction of that cost. So don't be afraid to talk to your production partner about that as well.
Wonderful. Next question, by the way. What's
All
the
right.
best event experience you guys have both had? So, Don, you can be first on this. I'm guessing maybe one that you've either been to or one that you guys have run. I have an example as well.
So the best event experience I've had might be I was an attendee, and it was an executive conference, and it was highly interactive. They used an app for dedicated iPads for every attendee. They used an app to drive engagement. You had access to all of the content, very interactive Q&A. There was a lot of stuff going on with that. They had two stages set up so that your attention, sort of like you go to the Grammys, right? They got three or four, five different stages. So it was very well laid out, very well thought out. And those are the ideas that I then take back and I try to apply to our business, to our clients. How can we bring that to the next event? So I think that was the best one was as an attendee.
Uh, two quick answers. One, I have the best experience as an attendee for reasons that I'd like to inspire other individuals, and the other is had the potential to be the best event I've ever been to. First one was, I mentioned this to you, the R&B singer Neo. If anybody knows that, he sang the song Miss Independent. I was working for Suave Body Wash at the time, and we had sponsored an event because Neo was launching a cocoa butter variant of lotion and body wash. And so the event, every single detail was thought about from the walk-in. So where you registered and checked in, as you walk through, the entire walkway and entry point was built out in decor. So you basically walked into this mystical experience. And that's when the lighting started. And then there was multiple screens that took you through kind of a career of Neo. So you saw different songs he won Grammys on, different performances. So you were getting a flavor, even if you didn't know who this individual was. And then as you walked in, the whole idea was he's cool as ice. So the theme of the event was cool as ice. And there was these massive blocks of ice that were brought in. And then also all the bars were made of custom ice. You can only imagine how hard that is to cool them from the bottom. But why I bring it up too is the entire back of the event used an LED wall that immersed you in the event. So anytime there were speaking engagements, anytime there was content to be produced, anytime they were playing music, this LED wall came to life. And not all the content was custom curated. Sometimes it was just projecting music videos. But because the size and scale of the technology, very, very good time. Second event, potentially to be the greatest, was HubSpot Inbound 2024. Now, as a platinum partner, we went to it. My expectations were through the roof. Ryan Reynolds did the keynote. Serena Williams was there. They had David Spade as a comedian. A lot of high profile names, but what I appreciate most about HubSpot Inbound is they make the event extremely accessible for all walks of life, knowing that there's a lot of people coming globally, that maybe it's their first time in the States. So accessibility was huge, both auditory, visual, kinesthetic. The way they brought in different elements of learning was also massive. So they had speakers of all different levels of experience. The one thing that I would give them critique on, and I did add feedback to this, is it wasn't clear which levels of experience you were getting. If you were a pro in one feature of HubSpot and you went to a discussion thinking you were going to learn more, and they walked you through kind of a beginner 101 course, it was difficult to connect back with, oh, I'm already an expert. I've already learned this for 3 years. I don't need to be in this conference or this breakout session. But I think Inbound does such a good job. Internet was provided, and the internet was actually really good. And their AV was fantastic. So I would say Inbound 2024, if anybody's a marketer, even if you don't use HubSpot, go next year. It's in San Francisco. It's the week before Salesforce's conference. I just think you meet so many brilliant people. So I would say those are the two best. All right, good. We're at time. No more questions. Don, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. You're an amazing individual. Your experience runs deep. All your answers are super helpful. Really appreciate it again. Thank you for being here. I know the audience got value from this, and we will chat soon. And thank you for all the attendees for coming, listening, giving us an hour of your time. We're beyond gracious for it. Talk to you soon.